right, let's go. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name's Kate Martorelli. I am the school counseling department leader here at Farmington High School. Thank you all for taking the time to attend this event this evening with Charles Wareham. The topic for this evening is paying for college, specifically the financial aid process. It can be stressful, it can be confusing, and especially during current times, considering what we've all been through during the last year and a half or so with the COVID-19 health crisis. So meetings like these tonight are especially appreciated, and just thanks in advance to you, Charles, for the information you'll share with us all tonight. The school counseling department here at Farmington High School recognizes this, so we're very grateful to have an expert in the field with us here tonight to discuss this important topic. Charles Wareham is a financial advisor specializing in college planning who speaks regularly at area high schools on the topic of financing college. On behalf of the Farmington High School Counseling Department, please join me in welcoming Charles Wareham this evening. Take it over. Thank you.
So welcome to a new and hopefully improved school year. My name is Charles, and I run Vaylark Financial Services located in downtown Hartford. And for almost 30 years now, we've provided presentations like this for tens of high schools throughout Connecticut. Myself and my team, we handle about 60 or so of these presentations per year. And over time, we have built up what I would like to believe is considerable expertise in the topic. But what I hope to do tonight is to take this massive amount of information that we have out there and boil it down to boots on the ground strategy that you can use in your family and your household to make good decisions in terms of college choices and effective decisions in terms of how to finance college. There we go. We should see the PowerPoint. Yes, thumbs up. Awesome. Great. Finally, before we get underway, we just dropped into the chat box 2 files that you'll want to save and download for reference for later on. One of them is a booklet that we produce here. It's called The Truth About Paying for College. And that will summarize a lot of the information that we deliver tonight. And the second is a guide for completing the FAFSA from parents, which hopefully you'll find useful as well. So I would like to share with you our website, Vaylark.com. And on our website, under the media section, there is a recording of this presentation done before the COVID era, a live recording from Glastonbury High School in 2019. So if you need to refer back to this, or you need a little bit more detail, or need to share this with anyone else in your family or someone that you know, I would encourage you to visit our website, and you will find the recording there as well as lots of useful information. With that in mind, I want to share with you a bit of my background here. I'm just like you, man. I got a youngster. He's at Penn State. He's a sophomore right now. He's 4th generation Penn State. We're unbelievably proud of him, and I know you are, of your youngsters as well. So I can empathize that maybe it's not quite the same experience with COVID these days, but in some way or another, whether virtually or in person, we are sitting in a room. And there are people in front of that room telling us about their university and how wonderful it will be to go there. And eventually we get to a slide that looks something like this. And it talks about, in this instance, that UConn matches or meets 75 or more than 75% of the students receive aid and some other useful facts. But, the thing that I worry about here, and one of the reasons we have this whole office program here, is these folks, I'm sure they're really nice people, but I doubt they understand the nuts and bolts of your family's finances. And I'm not even convinced they understand financial planning strategy as it applies to college funding. So I do want to give you the strategy that we use every single day, day in and day out, for literally thousands of Connecticut families, so that you can make reality-based decisions. When you get to the kitchen table and you were talking about what is doable, realistic, and affordable in your family for your children, you are coming from a reality-based place. Because I know there is tons of myth out there and tons of misunderstanding. We're going to clear all that garbage up today. And I'd like to be a resource for you afterwards as well. That if you need to talk with me, or if you'd like to have some individual attention, we offer complimentary consultations all day long. Happy to do it. I'd love to meet you. So for our presentation tonight, I'd like to address what we call the 5 partners. And these are the 5 players in the college funding process, if you will, that have to work together to make this all work. So it's important for us to understand what they can do, but also to understand what they can't do so that we can understand the moving parts and make good decisions about what to do next. And the first of these, of course, is our friends in the government. And they make available that FAFSA form, free application for student aid, that I'm sure you're all aware of, and that we consider to be the entry point into the college funding process. Now, some fun facts. We can start the process as of, tomorrow. It goes live October 1st, and you can start to populate information about your student. You'll need to put in a username and password, some information about your stuff. Income self-populates from the IRS. It's really not extremely complicated, but I do want to share 2 key points. Number 1, do not include your retirement accounts or home equity when they ask you about the stuff that you have. They will ask about investments, they'll ask about cash, what are the assets. Don't include those 2 items. It's not really clear in the instructions, but they are excluded. Now, if you do get into a jam, there is this thing called FAFSA Day. I'm not quite sure how it works in the COVID era, but in the past, there were folks like myself and like Kate and counselors and CPAs and other volunteers who would set up shop at various locations that you could come in to see with your information, and they would help you populate the FAFSA. We're not going to go through the FAFSA tonight. In my opinion, that's not the best use of time. It's not that hard to handle. I think you'll be okay. We're going to concentrate on strategy, if that's okay. And in order to understand that, we have to understand the parts of the FAFSA. And there are 6 parts over here that are more demographical in nature, than anything else. And we don't have to worry too much about those. We need to worry about this stuff over here, starting with who is a dependent or independent student. Now, some of you may remember in years past that you could live away from your parents, get an apartment, have an electric bill in your name, and you would eventually be considered an independent student, and they would stop looking at your parental assets and income. That has more or less gone away. It's very difficult to qualify as an independent student. So very likely your students will be required to get information from parents and put that into the FAFSA form. The exceptions are if the student is married, veteran of the armed services, has children, orphan, ward of the court, over age 24, graduate student, all the stuff that generally will not apply to us. So very likely your student is dependent, which means you will be required to include parental asset information. It also asks, who is the parent? Well, that would seem obvious, but more importantly, who is the custodian? And that comes into play an awful lot in divorce scenarios where we say, well, which parent fills out the data on the form? And the answer is, for this year, it is the parent who provides the most support. Doesn't matter who takes the tax deduction, doesn't matter who's paying child support, what the court agreements say. What matters is in what school district does the student go to and what parent lives in that district. And second, where does the kid sleep the most? And in many cases, we can control that to some degree. And if it's possible to have the custodial parent be the parent that has the lesser assets and income, that could potentially be a win. But watch out. The form is changing next year, and we're going to talk about that because it's going to affect parents, divorced parents greatly. They are going to include all parents next year. Household assets and income is where we're going to spend most of our information or most of our time. And people are always asking, well, which income, which assets? So let's go through that a little bit. In terms of assets, it's anything that is owned jointly or individually by you or your spouse. So I've put a few examples up here that are pretty common: cash, checking, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, non-resident real estate, and so on. But really what's important is the ownership, not the asset. It doesn't matter so much what the asset is. It could be a stock, a bond, a CD, a piece of property, or a jet airplane. What matters is who owns it. And if you or your spouse own it individually or jointly, it's expected to be disclosed on the FAFSA, as a resource that's available to pay for school. So what is not included? Generally speaking, it's retirement stuff, IRAs, 401ks, annuities, but also cash value of life insurance, equity in your home, some small business assets, and a few items like that. So, we say, and many people think, gosh, I'm going to take all this stuff off of this side of the coin, and I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to deposit it in my 401k. I'm going to reduce the equity in my home. We generally suggest that is not a good thing to do. In 98% of the cases, it does not make sense to try to reposition money to get a financial aid benefit. And I'm going to go over why in just a moment, but just understand, even though a lot of financial advisors out there recommend that, in my opinion, they know just enough about this stuff to be dangerous. So the overriding recommendation in 98% of the case, it does not make sense to move money around to try to improve your financial aid. So once you've entered in your assets and your income is pulled down from the IRS and all that, you're going to receive a student aid report. Immediately generates. When you're done, you press submit, boom, it pops up on the screen. We suggest you download that student aid report because it has all of the line item data that you entered, what was on line 3, what was on 27, and so on. And if we get a response for financial aid back that is different than we expected it would be, that's the first place we're going to look, is the student aid report, to see if there was a mismatch or you put an extra 0 or something of the sort. It also immediately shows your expected family contribution. And we'll talk about what that is in just a moment, but technically it is the amount that you are expected to contribute to your kids' college. It also shows your preliminary eligibility for grant and a few other things, allows for some updates. When this is all done, you will also enter in the school codes that you would like the FAFSA data sent to. And so you don't have to send the information to each of the schools. The FAFSA system will automatically forward it to the schools that you select. Fun little tip. We suggest putting your top 2 school choices basically in order. And when you list the schools on the FAFSA that you want this sent to, list them in the order of your most preferred to least preferred. And that is one alert for your top schools that you are top of mind for them, and they like to see that. So I mentioned a second ago, most of what I'm talking about today is only good for this year, and that's because the FAFSA has gone through a revamp. Last December, I think it was, there was a COVID relief bill that came out that also had a simplification act for the FAFSA, which will go effective, it will go live for school year 23-24. We'll start populating it in 2022 and be available then. And yes, they did make some improvements. The number of questions has been reduced, but it also generated a few other problems. And my guess is everybody that's attending this program will be affected by these changes, if not later, in 2 years, for the back 2 years, but even for some of your younger kids, possibly for their full college career. So simple stuff has changed. Male applicants no longer selected service. A drug conviction is not necessarily a problem. There's more Pell Grant dollars. Those are good things. Here's some of the not so good or possibly neutral things. The asset protection allowance, which means the amount that you are allowed to keep as an asset or savings before it counts against you for financial aid, has remained unchanged. You can still keep about $17,000 in cash and it won't count. But there's a lot of noise that that's going to go away within a few years, and every dollar that you have saved or set aside will show up as an asset to pay. Some of these things that we like have remained, but here's some of the stuff that we're concerned about. If we have a divorced parent, previously it was the parent you lived with that was the person who filled out the forms. That is scrapped, and they're now changing it to whichever parent provides the most support. So that means that strategy of having the kids live with the person who has the lesser assets and income is not going to be effective as a strategy in years to come. We think that's a major planning point. And if divorce is something going on in your family story, please call us. We need to go into that to talk about how to best position. Here's the massive one. is that previously, if you had more than one student in school at the same time, and we see this all the time, families with 2, 3 kids, they've got 2 or 3 years where the kids are all in school at the same time. You used to be able to divide the ability to pay by the number of students in school. That's also being taken away. So that's dramatically going to affect what happens for financial aid for families with multiple kids. Again, if that's a story in your situation, please let us know. That's something we should also strategize on. But wait, there's more. So we've talked a little bit about the FAFSA, which is a federal data gathering form for financial aid. There is a second form called the CSS Profile, which is a private data gathering form. On the FAFSA, there are some things they ask for and some things they do not. And it used to be that there are holes in the system we could drive a truck through. A lot of that is taken away by the profile because the profile is much more invasive. It requires information from non-custodial parents. Divorce was never a shelter here. Retirement accounts and home equity are also included on the CSS profile. Every asset we have is included on the CSS profile. And so, it's a lot more invasive. And this is part of the reason that I say it almost never makes sense to try and move money around in order to qualify for more financial aid. Because if we encounter the FAFSA, and in a few years with the changes in the profile, if in a few years with the FAFSA, it's going to change there also. Let's go with a little bit of the math to help you understand some more of this. So in the end, the formula for understanding financial aid is really, really simple. It's the cost of attendance, whatever that is, books, room, board, tuition, and stuff. Subtract from it what these data gathering forms say you can afford to pay, which we call the expected family contribution. The difference equals financial need. So to make an example, let's say we take a community college. It costs $20,000 a year to attend, and we go through the math, and your ability to pay is $5,000 a year. Aha, I understand that. We would qualify for $15,000 of financial support. Well, there's more detail to that story. And the detail is if we go to a more expensive school, the math might suggest we would qualify for more stuff, but we run into problems. And problem number one is something called gapping. Gapping says there just is not enough financial aid and scholarships and so forth out there to fill some of the very, very high costs of college we have. Some of these upper level schools are $60,000, $70,000, $75,000 a year. The cost is going up and financial aid and support is constantly being cut. So we're getting a widening gap between the cost versus what is available. The second is this expected family contribution. We have a perception as parents of what we think we can afford to pay. But the system says it could be significantly more. In fact, for a family that has an income of $125,000 a year and no savings at all, just income, their ability to pay is $23,000 and some change. So at UConn, they would have a need of only $6,300. That would be filled by the Stafford Loan program, and that's it. My message here is that what you feel you might be able to afford to pay is likely to be dramatically different than what the system says you can afford to pay. And if we add a little bit of assets to the equation, maybe $50,000 in savings or in a 529, you can see the ability to pay does not go up that much, only $3,000, which leads us to the final conclusion here. It's not the assets and the savings and the investments you have that causes the problem. It's the income. Just to live and breathe and walk down the street in Connecticut, we need incomes that are higher than the cutoff level for receiving financial aid on a FAFSA. Income, not assets, for most families is our problem. Let's dig into that a little bit more. This is a grid that shows the assets and the income for parents and children. If we have assets in the parent's name, either owned individually or jointly, those assets will generate 5.6% of the total as an ability to pay. If you have $10,000 in a CD it will generate $560 of ability to pay from that one asset. And all the ability to pay for all the assets are added up to come up with the final number. And that's where we say, my goodness, I've got savings, I've got investments, I got to go get a shovel and a coffee can and bury it in the backyard or something because it's going to prevent me from receiving financial assistance. Same for kids. Anything owned by the kids, they want 20% of whatever the kids have. And that's a lot of times, I think, and especially with some other advisors, that's where the thinking stops. But we have to go on to the next part, which is the income component. And up to 25% of your earned income will be expected to be used towards your ability to pay for school. So we suggest, something called the income hot zone. And the income hot zone is based on nearly 30 years of experience to say if your income is in a certain range, there is a known outcome from that income without considering assets at all. If you're in the $0 to $60,000 range of income, there is nothing for you to do. You're going to qualify for some of the maximum amount of financial assistance available. If you're between 60 to 120, we might have a little bit of wiggle room to do a few things to maximize your support. But as we get over 120,000 of income, there's nothing more for us to do again because we are out of range to qualify for any support from Uncle Sam above and beyond what we call the basic package, which is $5,500 on a Stafford loan, $2,000 of work study. That's it. That's a known. So we suggest that it's not the assets that is the problem. It is income. It's the money we earn. And as soon as we understand that component, we start to make much better choices in terms of what is doable, realistic, and affordable for college. In fact, we say financial aid is a terrible word to describe what we get. What we get is a loan package. And as we understand that, we start again to make better choices, which leads us to the second player in the process, which is the parents. And guys, tell me I'm wrong, because I'm a parent too. I've been there. Kids are attracted to and they want the very best. They have an expectation of a certain kind of college experience. In many cases, it's a more advanced experience than the one we had for ourselves as parents 30 some years ago. And often they want some of the larger, what we call mini elite or smaller mini elite, very expensive schools. In fact, here's some of the costs. I need to update my data. This is from 2020. Most expensive school in the country at that time was Sarah Lawrence and Wesleyan, but even UConn was $34. Penn State, as my youngster was going in, he's a sophomore, but entering in as a freshman, it was 48 and some change. And we look at these numbers and we say, my goodness, that's crazy. How are we going to pay for this? And that's how we remember financial aid. And oftentimes we tell our kids or, allow them to carry on with the thought process that there will be tons of support out there when meaningfully there were not. So here's an example. This data is just a little bit old, but it's still relevant. And this was a client I had a few years ago. His son went to UConn for 28. They got a whole bunch of support. He calls me up. He says, Charles, I got this letter. It says I only have to pay $2,800 a year out of pocket. That's good, right? That's great. But in reality, the vast majority of his package was just the ability to borrow. And now he's paying it back over time with interest. And so I think we have to understand what financial aid really means and what is the impact to our families. Guys, college lending is an absolute epidemic. We have data in our office that suggests the federal debt, that what they report, the average federal debt is $26,000. Our experience is it's way higher than that. And that's often because we come from well-educated communities, affluent communities, and our kids are doing very well in a great school system, and they would like to go to a school that they could academically qualify for, but financially might be a stretch. And that's very quickly where we end up, like my friend here, with a condo mortgage worth of debt without the condo. And I think it's important for us to have this reality-based conversation with kids because very quickly we can get into some hot water. And that leads to the students that they have a role in this process also. And we want kids to understand that this is not playtime and this is the next phase of their lives, and they are expected to become financially responsible adults and make decisions along those lines. We tell kids all the time, they come in the office here, a lot of times the parents bring them in because the kids won't listen to the parent. Mom, Dad, I want to go to Boston, whatever it is. And we have to be the bad guy. The parents bring them in here. We sit down here. We have a cup of tea, and it's a nice, pleasant conversation. But we very quickly get into, do you realize how much debt you are going to have? And we say things like, listen, you're smart. You got great grades. You did well in school. You excelled. Be smart one more time and make a reality-based choice for college. Because if we come out with the kind of debt we're considering, you might not be able to buy a home. You might not be able to save for retirement, all kinds of stuff. I don't want to bore you with it too much right now. So I want to give you a weapon or a tool or whatever you want to call it. And that is when you're talking to your kids about the amount of money that they would be borrowing in order to finance a certain college, don't talk about the total amount of debt they will graduate with. Kids don't care. They don't understand what $80,000 worth of debt means. They'll say, Mom, Dad, don't worry. I'll pay for it. It's fine. Don't worry. I got it. Tell them instead about the monthly payment. And we have a very simple formula we've discovered in our office. Take the total amount of debt that they will graduate with, divide it by 100. That's your monthly payment. So $80,000 worth of debt will be an $800 a month loan payment when you graduate. Kids all of a sudden very quickly get that concept, and now they start making smart choices about school. They understand that they are the primary borrowers. They start participating in finding sources of funding. I'll give you some more data on that as we go. So first on that, how can we get the kids to get more involved in this process and to find some money on their own? Now, in the past, we used to recommend all these various websites. I've kind of gotten away from that. We're only recommending one tool these days, and that is the Scully app, SCHOLLY. You can get it from the App Store, or go to myscully.com. And this is a tool. You enter in data about your students, and it goes out into the world and finds scholarships and support they qualify for and flies back with an easy-to-use interface that helps you to apply and manage these applications. And this little fella here won 35 scholarships using little tiny ones from the Scully app and used it to go to Drexel, essentially, for free. So good stuff. In fact, I think it's also important for us to reframe our thinking about how college is really paid for. When we think of financial aid, we think of federal Pell Grants and free money and stuff. And yeah, that stuff is still out there. And we think about the state money and the independent, yeah, that stuff's out there too. In fact, you go to a presentation like this from other speakers like myself, that's all they talk about. There's all the free money out there, except the problem is none of us will qualify for it because we make too much darn money. So we have to rethink the source of our support. And by far, the biggest source of dollars we have is career-specific and merit and achievement dollars. So what does that mean? Well, career-specific is money related to the path that you want to go into for employment. And a really simple example here is ROTC, which is where you go to school on a scholarship from the Armed Services. You graduate as an officer, you go into the services, Navy, Air Force, whatever, for a handful of years, and you got free money to go to school to do that. The Teach Grant, if you intend to go into teaching, especially in certain needs schools, they will forgive a lot of loan dollars and provide grant money. There's grant money for health and human services, for police and firefighter. But we also suggest, especially for the more expensive schools, our most important source of dollars is from the school themselves. We have to, I think, not think so much about federal and state money as being available, but money instead from the schools themselves. And this has been and always will be grades-based. So I'm often asked, well, what grades? Well, we say that process starts around the 3.5 GPA range on an unweighted scale. And that as you get into 3.5, 3.6, you start to qualify for the presidential scholarship, which is anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 a year. As we get to 3.7, 3.8, we start to see more money from the endowments. We might see $24,000, $26,000, $28,000, even $30,000 a year. You get up to 4.1, 4.2. You start to see upwards of $30,000, $40,000 a year from some of these more expensive schools. And by the way, how do we get to 4.2 on a 4.0 system? That's what the AP classes and honor classes that help to get us there. So we think One of the most powerful ways to help reduce the cost of college is through merit and achievement dollars. So much so that we like to talk about the negotiation and appeals process. So when you get to the school, their job is to make you an offer. And come springtime of the senior year, you're going to get some letters that look sort of like this. And my data here is a little old. You know, at the time, Rochester was about $50,000 a year, but it still applies. And we say that, gosh, we had a really bright student here, and that person received more than $20,000 worth of grants and so forth, some work study, the maximum amount of support from Uncle Sam that was available at that time. Rochester was about 50. They came up with more than 27 to support, so more than half the cost of school. That's great news. But we also got an offer from UConn. And UConn said, wow, great grades. We'd like to offer you $4,000 from our academic excellence program. We'll give your parents the privilege of borrowing $15,500 at 7.9%. No work study, no subsidized money, all unsubsidized. And how would you like to come to UConn? And we says, well, that's great news, but you know, I understand that you guys cannot offer the kind of money that Rochester can. But I'm really curious about this thing, the work study program and the subsidized money, where you didn't offer anything, but Rochester did offer something on what should be a federal program that is uniform, right? We should get the same result everywhere. Well, it's not so much the case. What happens is the feds push their money down to the school level for the school to distribute how they see fit in order to attract the students they want to attract. And when we saw that, I said, aha, I got you. Now I know we can negotiate, because you are making these financial aid decisions at the school level, not necessarily the federal level. So now we go to, in the springtime, when we get our award letters back, we're not done. We should narrow it down to the 2 or 3 schools that we think are the top choices for you and enter into a negotiation and appeal process. We think there are 4 appealable points. Point number 1 is unmet need. An unmet need is mathematically, the system said you should have qualified for more support that was not offered. We can go into that and hopefully ask them for some additional support. Number 2, unusual achievement. What can we bring forward about your student that the school does not already know about that helps them appear more attractive at that school, and they might potentially offer additional support? Number 3, unusual circumstances. Hey, I know one. How about COVID? Was there possibly a layoff, some sort of issue that caused family finances to be challenging? Did we have to raid our savings? You know, those sorts of things. And if there's something along those lines, we might be able to appeal there also. And finally, the last one is number 4, competition between schools. And this is where we show one school the offer from another school and say, listen, if you could only kindly match that offer or provide just a tiny bit more support to get closer to it, we would consider coming to your school. We do this all the time. And so I'll give you some examples that, here we go. There's an email that came in a year or 2 ago from one of our clients that after the negotiation process, they were able to up their award from Quinnipiac. She says might be a record, I'm not so sure, but Quinnipiac is notoriously difficult to get additional dollars out. But the point is, if we position the story in the right way, we can see some results. And this is not a one-off. We see this all the time. In fact, I would suggest that half of the time that we coach someone to go through the appeal process, we get a positive outcome. And I'd be happy to show you how we do that. But also, this is something you can do on your own. We don't charge for it, and I don't think you should pay for it either. I think as soon as you pay someone to negotiate the scholarships and merit dollars on your behalf, and the school finds that out, conversation changes. It's now a business choice for them. It's no longer a altruistic choice for them to accept a student that maybe is deserving. So we think you should write a letter, send it FedEx, don't call them, don't Skype them, don't email. It's too easy for them to blow you off. Wait for them to sign for that FedEx and then call them and say, listen, I see you received our package. I'd love to chat some more about that. And again, look us up. We'll coach you some more on how to get that done. All right, a little bit on the nasty COVID bug. Last year, this was more of an issue for us, but there are still some points that remain. This is Penn State last year. And you'll notice all of the tape that separates the students, and they eventually shut down classes altogether. Everything was done online. The students were so sick of it. This is a picture my son sent me. He was so sick of having classes in his dorm, in his PJs, that he took his laptop and materials to the classroom where his class would have been held and watched it on Zoom in the classroom. This is that same classroom today. So I'm absolutely thrilled to see that we have students, we have butts in seats again, and it's a wonderful thing. I'm very excited about it. That being said, there are still some factors we can consider. Number one, we think there is an increased ability to negotiate your offer based on your experience with COVID, and that there may be some possible tuition offset that we can negotiate if there are continued online classes. We also recognize that schools have a reduced ability to support because they're also undergoing some financial stress. But the government has also helped us a bit and increased our access to IRAs. If you need to raise your IRAs to help pay for school, there are provisions to do that without a 10% penalty and deferral on the taxes that might be due. We continue to warn that there is an increased risk of early shutdown. We encourage your kids to pack lightly because they might get 24-hour warning to be sent home. And you might have to run to pick them up and load everything they have in the back of the car and bring them home because of the MU or the Delta or the Lambda Chi Alpha outbreak or whatever the heck it is. Mask usage is still required indoors, and kids are screaming about that, I can tell you. And I think we're only a heartbeat away from required vaccinations or being dismissed from school, which increases the likelihood of emotional stress. And I think we should be aware of that and help our students through this process. We're not out of the woods yet. So last piece, and then we'll start to open up for some questions. We think that the last player in this process is the financial firms. And they do help us by providing financial instruments and consulting and lending and guidance and things of that sort. But two firms I want to point out very briefly. First is Chet, and the other is CHSLA. Now, Chet is the state of Connecticut's preferred college savings vehicle. And I am asked over and over again, where should I put my money as I'm saving and paying for college? And the no-brainer answer for a state of Connecticut resident is the Chet 529 program. I see now that I need to update my slide because I still have the logo for the Hartford on there. The plan has recently transitioned away from the Hartford over to Fidelity. We think that's a great move. Fidelity is an outstanding company. We love what they do. But still, people say all the time, why Chet? I heard they don't perform. I shouldn't use it. My money's locked up. It's all garbage. Chet performs fantastic. My son's college money is in Chet. I'm thrilled with the performance. We're doing just great. Often what you have, though, is an advisor who doesn't understand this process and puts us into the age-based portfolio, which we do not recommend, because the age-based portfolio makes its investment decisions based on nothing that applies to reality. They make it only based on the age of the kid. And as the kid gets older, you get more and more into bonds, thinking that's a great move because bonds are conservative. And in any other scenario, I might agree, except for the scenario we are in. Because as interest rates go up, and that's basically guaranteed to happen as early as November, bonds go down. It's an inverse relationship that is basically one-to-one. So you might have a lot of money in an age-based portfolio that is up to half or more in bonds that is likely to underperform. So I'm often asked, can you transition a 529 to a Chet plan? Yes, you can. There's no charge, cost, tax, or penalty to do so. And I would recommend doing that because as you make deposits to Chet, they are state of Connecticut tax deductible. It is the only plan on the planet that allows you to deduct your contributions off your state of Connecticut tax return. So much so that you can make a deposit today, use it tomorrow to pay for school, and that's okay. You can still keep the tax deduction. So we recommend every dollar that you intend to send to college should be filtered through the Chet account. People say, gosh, my kids are 18 years old. They're going to be freshmen. I don't have time for the investment to grow. We don't care. We want it for the tax deduction. And that in itself is a really strong reason to use Chet as opposed to any other plan. The second company I'd like to introduce you to is CHSLA. At some point or another, some families are looking for additional monies. And we recommend CHSLA as the state of Connecticut's lending agency for a possible source for additional lending dollars. We think they do a pretty good job. I think I need to update my rate. It's lower than 4.95 fixed. It's less than that. We like it because the student is the borrower. That's what we want. We want the loans in the kids' names with parents as cosigner. But one of my favorite features is this, the co-borrower release. Because the parents are required to be a cosigner, that means it impacts your credit report. So the faster we can get you off of that loan as a cosigner, the better. It improves your ability to borrow for other kids. So I know for a lot of people, this is a lot of information, and I really want to get down to the heart of it. What do we do? How do we pay for college? We use a strategy called stacking. And stacking says there is no one single thing that we do to make college doable, realistic, and affordable. It's lots of little things that we pile on top of each other that starts to look like a way to pay college. And the first of those is a recognition that we might need to start setting aside more cash flow than we currently are to pay for college. And that's not because we're trying to save or invest enough to build up enough savings to pay for college in one shot. Nobody does that. What they do is start to commit dollars to college more and more as they get used to it as part of a monthly cash flow, so that later on we can redirect that cash flow to the university as part of their payment plan each month. But prior to getting there, we're probably making deposits into a 529. We're also looking for other assets. I mean, we've got stuff everywhere. We've got the EE bonds. We've got the old Janus Mutual Fund from 15 years ago. We've got the Disney stock. We've got the savings. There's stuff everywhere that we probably should consolidate into a 529, probably into a Chet, get a tax deduction, identify that as the amount of money we have to pay for school, start looking at what we can do to augment between now and then, but then later redirect flow into the university on part of their payment plan. Now, most people will qualify for the Stafford Loan. Every American does. We might talk to CHSLA for a couple of bucks. We might use Scully or other scholarships to help out a little. We might use a Roth for school. We didn't talk about it, but a Roth is a very favorable account to use for college. The state might be helping us. There are some tax credits we might qualify for. Grandparents and cousins may eventually help out. And as you start to stack all of this together and identify it, we start to identify a way to pay for college. In fact, we recommend getting a little bit creative as well, too. We want the students involved in helping out. We might raid cash value of life insurance. We're definitely going to appeal. We might help the grandparents understand what the problem really is and help ask them to help. Maybe they gift early. If you have a highly appreciated stock, we gift the stock to the university instead of selling it. If you sell it, you pay taxes on it and you walk away with less. But if you gift it to the university and let them sell it, they're a tax-exempt entity. They pay zero taxes. But in the end, we think the most important part of this is to build what we call a cash flow model. And a cash flow model is an Excel spreadsheet or a whatnot that lists all the various assets and students and what their costs might be, their scholarships, what work study we might be getting, to come up with amount due by parents. And then we start to plug in all the various cash flows, income, gifting, sale of restricted stock, whatever it is. And when you pull out, you get a 30,000-foot view on how we're going to get 2, 3, 1, 4 kids out the door. And now we can start to model things. We can say, well, what if the cost of school changes? What if my rate of return changes? What if I save less? What if I borrow more? Let's calculate. And it helps us to understand whether we're on pace, off pace, and what the impact of our changes are. If you're an Excel whiz, I know you know just what to do. But you don't have to be an Excel whiz to do this. You can do this on the back of a Wendy's placemat. But I would recommend that everybody, considering how they're going to manage this massive cash flow project, this is the tool that I would encourage you to either build on your own or come visit with us. We give these away for free all day long. We really just want your family to be successful. and we'll be happy to help. So what did we learn today? Well, number one, we learned we've got to keep the expectations under control. The kids are driving this conversation for the most part. And we're kind of going into this conversation blind because we don't know what is doable, realistic, and affordable. Hopefully after tonight's session, you have a little better idea. We'll be happy to help you dial that in as well. Number two, don't shoot yourself in the foot. Let's understand how various assets count against you or for you or whatnot, and position yourself in the best possible light. Number three, let's use other people's money. That's lending, but it's also scholarships, and it's also grandparents and other stakeholders. Remember that we want to negotiate, kick, scream, and appeal your top choices. Remember, stacking is the solution. It's no one single solution. It's many solutions piled on top of each other. And in order to manage that, we probably need a cash flow model of some sort to help us understand that. And finally, let's grab some help and support if you need it. I know Kate has a fantastic office with lots of background on kids and families that have gone before you, and they're happy to share that data. We're happy to help as well. I'm going to put my contact information up, but I'm also going to ask Emily to post into the chat room a scheduling link. And if you would like to chat, either Zoom or on the telephone or even in person, we're doing in-person visits, please click on that scheduling link and it takes you directly to my calendar. And now you can plug yourself in wherever it's easy, efficient, and convenient, and I'll be happy to chat with you. There's no charge, there's no cost, no obligation. In fact, we don't charge for this at all. This is not a profit center for us. This is a way to make friends. My role in this is to help your family be successful, help your kids have a great college experience, and for us to become friends. We're very interested in making new friends and helping people as we can go. Look, if you win the Powerball, look us up. We're happy to help. But other than that, we're happy to be a source of information and guidance for you. And we can talk about wealth management and retirement planning and estate planning and all the other stuff we do. But in terms of college funding, I'd like your family to be successful, and we'll help any way we can. With that in mind, I'm going to quit for now. I see we have 115 attendees. That's awesome. And we are recording this, and I will make that available for Kate to post as needed. But I'm going to stop the screen sharing for now, and we're going to go to the chats. And if you would like to unmute yourself, if you're feeling like unmuting, we will take some verbal questions, and then we will go to the chats. Emily is yelling at me from the other room that she has some questions, so we'll take those. But for right now, let's go to the phones. Any questions I can take? Go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Hey, Charles, this is Sanjay.
Hey, Sanjay, what's going on?
I'm good, man. How about you?
Doing well.
Okay, thanks for doing this. This is really helpful.
My pleasure.
Yeah, the question I have is the income label that you shared with us. Are you talking about the gross income or the net income that comes in?
So great question. The figure that they are interested in is the adjusted gross income, which is the bottom line on the first page of your 1040 tax return. However, they add back to that number any deductions you previously took for retirement contributions. In other words, if you contribute to your 401k, that's a deductible item to you. Lowers your taxable income. You contribute to a regular traditional IRA, that's also deductible. Those things are added back. And the thought here is that your retirement contributions are discretionary. You could choose not to save for your retirement in favor of paying for college. And now these days, the information comes direct from the IRS. You have no control over what number it is. Whatever was on your tax return plus contributions to retirement plans, that's the number they're going to use.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions, please?
Hi, Charles. My name is Tom Cervello.
Hello, Tom.
For you. Over the years, a lot of our grandparents or aunts and uncles have given the kids AA bonds from if you use those for college, are they tax exempt, and how do you qualify for that, or am I mistaken?
So I think you're on the right track. Now, I'll be honest with you that we don't see that much any longer. Most people have graduated to 529s. So I'm a little rusty on the rules regarding government bonds, but I believe it applies to the AA bonds.
Okay.
It may apply to the A bonds. Please don't quote me, but as best as I understand it, you can go ahead and cash those in. And in any other circumstance, that would create a capital gain for you. But there's a question on your tax return that says did you cash in any of these bonds and was it for college purposes? And if you click off that item, it negates the taxes that normally would be due. Usually that is proven and evidenced by a form that you will eventually get from the school that says, here's what you paid and here's how you paid it. And please add these to your IRS records.
Thank you very much. And thanks for doing this.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Any other questions, please?
I have one question. This is Surya.
Yes, sir.
Charles. The question that I have is, if the student applies for the early decision for some of the private colleges,
Yes.
The financial aid they typically provide, do they give does the student get the full advantage of the financial aid, or they will be at a slightly disadvantage?
You raise a very good point. There's probably a little more to this question than you might have expected, but we get this all the time. Should I do early decision? Should I do early action? In my opinion, and others may disagree, and Kate, if you have a thought on this, we don't recommend early decision. And the reason is because we don't know what the financial aid offer will be. And second, we have now committed to that school and taken away any negotiating power you might have had. We suggest early action is at least equivalent. It alerts the school that they're a top choice, but it's not binding. And we do get, of course, the right to review the financial offer, and we can still negotiate. But Kate, do you have any thought on that?
No, it's similar feedback from our end. I think early decision, just with that binding element, is a commitment to a school if you are accepted that your son or daughter is going, without ever knowing at that point what your financial aid package may look like. So the conversation is ultimately a family decision, but should include all elements around this binding, and it's not great to withdraw from a binding decision. So if you are accepted, it's really in your best interest as a family to make a good decision there and to look at the different types of admissions umbrellas to apply under, and understanding that, early decision is binding. And if you're accepted, you're going without necessarily receiving that financial aid package information yet.
I think early decision is only appropriate for those families that have every penny they need to pay for the full price of school and are willing to do that for whatever reason.
Thank you so much.
Giving you a full ride.
Sure. Yes, Betsy.
I said, or I told my daughter, if college is going to give you a full ride, then we'll do that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, right. Okay, any other questions, please?
Hi, this is Leonid.
Hello, Leonid.
Hi, how would 529 assets qualify? Where do we include them? You kind of didn't
Excellent
mention.
question. Thank you. So 529s, assuming they are set up properly, I only say that caveat because I've seen it once or twice where it wasn't. But if it is set up properly, they are owned by the parents with the kids as the beneficiary. So they are considered a parental asset. The issue, or one of the issues, can be if you have 2 or 3 kids, you may have 2 or 3 529s. And all of them are considered a parental asset, and all of them have to be included for the one student. Because technically speaking, no matter how many 529s you've got, they are all considered part of the family pot of money for college, not allocated to each individual student. Good, thank you. Other questions, please? Okay, going once, going twice. All right, so at this point, we're going to go to the chats. We're going to close out the video. And I'm going to close the camera, but I'll keep the chat room open, and we'll go to typed questions on chat. And of course, once again, if you do need us at any point, don't hesitate to call. You can find us at vaylark.com, VAYLARK.com. We'd be happy to see you and talk with you whenever it's convenient. Kate, anything else you want to add?
Nope, just appreciate everyone attending this tonight. Thank you, Charles. It's wonderful as always. Great information, and so appropriate and timely with kind of questions we receive from families and what a lot of people have on their minds.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Happy to serve. Good night, guys. We'll see you in the chats.
Take care.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the information.